It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
It was sung
by immigrants as they struck out the distant shores, pioneers who pushed westward against the unforgiving wilderness. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Follows is a special presentation from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. We've been contemplating doing something like this for a very long time. The, I suppose, recent emphasis for doing it was a poll by the Des Moines Register in Iowa, and the Iowa caucus in general. As many that have been following the debates and the campaign trail have seen the increasing debate between the quote-unquote liberals in the Democratic contest and the progressive wing. The progressive wing being Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, Medicare for All, and various other programs that they are espousing to address income inequality. Now, on the other end, Joe Biden and the traditional liberals, at least they are traditional liberals, the mayor from South Bend, Mayor Pete, and Amy Klobuchar, a senator from the neighboring state of Minnesota. Now, she has cast her entire campaign on delivering. Thus, we debated the title here, and the title of this episode is The Man from Facebook versus Amy Klobuchar on the 20th of November, 2019. Very interesting. We'll look a little bit at both of the candidates and where they originally started. And we'll start with Mayor Pete. He started out at Harvard. And from Harvard, he became a Rhodes Scholar. He started to very carefully craft a career that was in academia. His parents were in academia. They teach at Notre Dame in South Bend. But his was beyond that. He did an internship in Chicago at a news station by a lady that's on our Facebook page, and she supports him. One of few African Americans probably that are in his cheering section. But on from there, he went to Deloitte as a business consultant, and his political career became carefully crafted. He entered the contest and became a mayor of South Bend, and that in itself launched his political career. But how he got into this presidential campaign will rely on a number of publications that tell his story, from Harvard and his association with Zuckerberg, the boss at Facebook, and its further implications. Now, his campaign is very carefully crafted based upon his being a mayor of a small town. And as Amy Klobuchar says, there's not much of a base there in terms of a political resume. Joe Biden has been around for basically 50 years, and he has been vice president. He has an extensive resume. But his campaign platform from our side, on the progressive side, is rather weak, period. So thus we do this type of program highlighting these traditional liberals. Now, again, none of these campaigns, except for Bernie Sanders, follow the actual progressive mold, but we won't go into that one. What we'll do here is we'll first look at the polling, and then we'll go to the articles of how we got where we are. And later today there will be a debate in Atlanta, Georgia, at the studio of Tyler Perry. Now, Tyler Perry has the studio, the only one that is owned by an African American. He's had a volume of work out there in the comedy field, and it is in Atlanta. This particular debate will focus on African Americans, no doubt about that, and it'll be interesting between those two candidates. Amy Klobuchar, of course, being a former prosecutor from a state that does not have a lot of African people in it, but more than in Iowa, and particularly out of the Twin Cities area where she is from, is a little bit different. She is, of course, a daughter of the working class, and so it's a different perspective on her life than on Mayor Pete. He's a bourgeois person out of an academic family, and thus he followed academia, and then he went from there into, I guess you'd say, communications, at least his internship, and from there to Deloitte, and his framing was there. And also, for some very strange reason, enlisted in the Navy as a intelligence officer, went to Afghanistan to get that resume, and that is part of his campaign. Since the campaign of Barack Obama, and we could go back to G.W. Bush, none of those individuals, and even including D.J. Trump, have pushed any type of military career because they did not have one. Nor does Joe Biden. But thus he's framing that in a traditional campaign sense, and we have to understand where Iowa is in 2019 as opposed to where it was in 2008. It is more conservative. The Republican Party has basically ran a roughshod, at least to recent years here in the last election, in the state of Iowa. The last person from a bordering state to get into the nomination was Michelle Bachmann for the Republicans, and she disappeared. We'll talk about some disappearing candidates as we go along here, but let's firstly get to the latest polling to see where we actually got to the juncture we are at this particular time. Move along here a little bit, and we'll go to Real Clear Channel and look at some polls here to see where they are. We'll basically look at a national poll from The Hill, a center-right publication. This is a Democratic nomination. They have Biden up by 12 points at 30, Liz Warren at 15, Bernie Sanders at 18, and the mayor of South Bend at 7. In that particular poll, Harris at 4, and so forth and so on. Amy Klobuchar at 1, and they have even Bloomberg in the poll at 3. Now, if we jump to the Des Moines Register poll, we'll get, this is the only one we've seen where, actually, we have the CBS YouGov poll. We'll do, firstly, this was on Sunday, the Monday Morning Quarterback, so we'll do it here. And they have the Mayor Pete at 25, Liz Warren at 16, and Joe Biden at 15, and Bernie at 15. Amy Klobuchar is at 6 in this poll. Now, this is the Iowa Register poll, the Cadillac of polls done by Salzer and Company. Of course, the Register itself has changed over time. It's owned now by USA Today unless they have changed it. Now this poll is done with a CNN. We'll tell you lots about how it is set up. Now we'll go to the CBS News poll. It has the mayor from South Bend at 21, Liz Warren at 18, and Bernie Sanders at 22, and also Joe Biden. Amy Klobuchar has a 4 in that poll. And then we have more or less the also-rans. Bloomberg is at 1. Yang is at 1, and so forth and so on. So basically, Kamala Harris is tied with Amy Klobuchar in that poll. Now, if the CBS poll, and if we go to New Hampshire, again, this is with CBS, Warren is up by 9 in New Hampshire. She has 31. Joe Biden, 22. Bernie Sanders, 20. And the mayor from South Bend, 16. Amy Klobuchar, 3. That's in New Hampshire. Now, moving on to Nevada, there Joe Biden is way ahead. He's at 30. Liz Warren is at 21. Bernie Sanders at 23. Buttigieg in the single digits at 9. Lunchbox Joe is up by 10. And if we move to South Carolina, it's a runaway ball game. He's up by 28 in South Carolina. Of course, South Carolina, the party there is a party of the followers of O.J. Simpson. So we'll be going to Atlanta in similar conditions there. Liz Warren has 17, Bernie Sanders 15. Buttigieg has dropped to 8 in the single digits. And Amy Klobuchar at 1. She doesn't have much of a presence in South Carolina. It'll be interesting to see if that changes after the debate. Now, that's what we'll be looking at, post-debate and after the debate, this November debate. And, of course, at the same time, we have the hearings going on in Washington. Colonel Veneman was there. He is a specialist on Ukraine. I would bring that fact up. And he was troubled by what he heard on the call from DJ Trump and reported it to the chain of command. That was basically the big takeaway on Tuesday. And now on Wednesday, they have Mr. Sunderland. He is a Trump supporter, business type, hotel type owner out of Portland, Oregon. And he is witness to it firsthand. Now, these people are both first-hand witnesses. So he has changed his test as one of the witnesses today. But to put that out, NPR, I believe, Marist University poll, that basically has that 44-45. In other words, a deadlock in the nation. So again, that is deadlocked up. So in that movement, that's back to E.J. Dionne's split screen. The screen is still split. So that is where we are in those terms. Let's go to some articles here. Starting out here, Mia Pete's relationship with Facebook. It is a complicated relationship between the world's most influential corporation and Mia Pete have come under scrutiny after Zuckerberg passed along to the campaign. That's why he's called a man. This is from Scott Bisbee. He's the national reporter here. This was a Daily Beast, incidentally, where we were getting this from. Let's go back to it. A picture of old Mia Pete setting out there. The spring of 2004, when Facebook was little more than an online portal for students at Harvard. Senior there at the time, Mia Pete was the website's 287th user. 15 later, the relationship between the world's most influential corporation and Mia Pete has obviously continued. When he passed along some recommendations here. Now, we're getting reports from various places here with Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg himself, if you recall, toyed with running for president. Of course, the troubles at Facebook have, as they say, got that one out. Bloomberg reported two billionaire Facebook founders, Zuckerberg, had passed along resumes of two individuals seeking position on Mia Pete's campaign staff. The hires in question, there's some specialists there named Eric Milinski, Wordhuff, were recommended to the campaign manager there by Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan. And Mike Skirmuck, I think. So these are some of the things that come out. Other people we got on the stat recommendations from former presidents, civil rights leaders, and so forth and so on. Pete's high school teacher, that was Liz Smith, Bloomberg's, Buttigieg's communication director. We made staff decisions on how to build the best team in politics, which I'm proud to report we have. Well, that every campaign staff always said that, and the campaign, of course, officially launched due here. But as some fellow Democratic presidential aspirants called for the government to potentially break up big tech, and this is where the whole issue comes go. I believe this is Wire magazine here actually, but some fellow Democratic presidential hopefuls called for the government to potentially break up large tech companies, and Facebook's leadership continues to defend the company's position. Now, Facebook is a global organization, and of course it was active in the 2016 election along with Cambridge Analytica. And it was also active in the Brexit election in the UK when campaigns in the UK took on an American-type campaign style. Period. That politicians shouldn't be considered exempt from its rules regarding. Now, this is where they make their money. Politicians shouldn't be exempt from it regarding hate speech, harassment, false advertising. Relationship between Buttigieg and Silicon Valley is under renewed scrutiny. And not only is he implied here from the Wire magazine article, speaking to voters in Nashua, New Hampshire, after the article was initially published, Buttigieg said that the company's ad policy was a mistake and said Facebook has a responsibility to pull false ads from its site, political or otherwise. I believe the breakup of a big company is a remedy that should be on the table, he said, adding that he doesn't think that such a proposal should be declared in advance by a politician. So in other words, Mayor Pete is hedging here. He's putting it out there, and this is his whole situation in terms of his resume. He can be summed up in one word as an opportunist. And in this issue, he's going around basically saying, well, it could be considered, but not now by a politician, and that's the effect. Senator Warren, whose political life has been defined by curbing corporate power, the appearance of any coziness between Zuckerberg and the political campaign particularly is one that's hot on her trail and is bad enough. It's regardless of the fact that the two staff hires were not in political roles. My view on Mark Zuckerberg are pretty clear. He runs a company that has too much political power, Warren told a group of reporters on a Monday when asked about the resume exchange. They've already have too much influence in Washington. They're helping drive every conversation in a way that protects Mark Zuckerberg. His company that undermines our democracy, and that is why I have said I think it's time to enforce the antitrust laws. And those antitrust laws have been around since Teddy Roosevelt and Bull Moose. Already on the books. We need to break these big tech companies up. Warren has pointed to Facebook outside influence and alleged disinterest in preventing the spread of fake news as evident that the company has failed to learn from the lessons of 2016 presidential campaign, when pages are dedicated to share fake information, sometimes with the assistance and orchestration of the Russian government. But the Russian government was a minor player in this, and this is something to remember here. Ad buys were the big thing. And address Trump isn't just positioning a lie on his own page for his own followers. Facebook accepted millions of dollars from Trump, and they still are, to run political ads, including ones of disinformation and outright lies. Facebook already helped elect DJ Trump once. They'll do it again and profit off of it. And this is where the difference is here in this particular candidate and some others. One measure, at least, the mayor is so far in a way the preferred candidate of Facebook employees, according to a review of federal election data by the Daily Beast. The mayor of South Bend raked in $23,000 from Facebook workers in the first 6 months of 2019, a sum that includes a check written by some of the most senior workers there. David Marcus, the former president of PayPal and current head of Facebook Messenger, donated $2,800 a day before he officially launched. Naomi Giss, I suppose, a senior director of growth, engagement, and mobile team at Facebook, and the company's vice president, what a joke, for social good, also donated $2,800. Other high-level donations from Facebook's upper ranks included Sharif, he is head of global marketing for WhatsApp, $2,000. Victoria Grand, WhatsApp's vice president of policy, $2,000 there also. So this kind of shows where these people are. Witness and Charles Hughes published a piece in the New York Times calling for the company to be broken up. The Mayor Peavy told the San Jose Mercury News. That's why Hughes made a very convincing case that no company should have the type of power these tech companies have. He prefers implementing a spectrum of regulations over the industry. Some preferences may lie beyond policy. However, Buttigieg is the youngest candidate in the field, has called for increased government technological literacy. Oh boy. Pointing to the congressional hearings, which featured Zuckerberg's example of people in charge of regulating a vast, powerful force, demonstrating they have no concept of what's going on. So he's talking about education here. This is the oldest Doge in the out there. Politicians, the little judge told the Mercury News, need some kind of literacy in these technologies, what they mean, and more importantly, what they can do in order to regulate properly, although he added that the critique was not necessary in an age. Buttigieg's campaign denied that his support for Facebook, workers and tech industry more broadly means he is any softer on Silicon Valley. Since the beginning of the campaign, we built a top-tier operation with more than 430 staff in South Bend and around the country, said the National Press Secretary Chris Metaphor. In a statement, the staff comes from all backgrounds. Everybody's working hard to elect Mayor Pete. Zuckerberg, meanwhile, told reporters on Monday that passing along resumes shouldn't be taken as endorsement. When a number of colleagues who I worked with in Facebook and my philanthropic foundations were interested in working there, they asked me or my wife Priscilla to send over their resumes. Why do you think that was? Zuckerberg said in a press conference call on Monday during a conversation about election security, I think this probably should not misconstrued as if I am deeply involved in trying to or anything like that. Well, he knows an indication what is going on, and that in itself is the way he is going. There's no doubt about that. So these papers pulled it in, where we had it, the Daily Beast and various PACs here, Facebook trying to influence people in Washington. It doesn't stop with the mayor, no doubt about that. There are others out there also that are trying to get in cozy with Silicon Valley. But that in itself, having seen Zuckerberg's visit to South Bend, it's in 2017, Facebook Live with Mayor Pete, colleagues later asked Mark and Priscilla to connect them with the Buttigieg campaign, as they were interested in joining. So, whereas they've been there, this is a very open period following Zuckerberg had made similar connections to others that asked about the email on a call with reporters. He acknowledged that he and his wife passed along the hiring recommendation because he had to do. Now, he claimed he hadn't endorsed Zuckerberg. Well, he's as close to endorsement as can be. And where Wire and company come in here is the threat to privacy. period. And from a CNN town hall to our launch a month later, we've literally gotten 7,000 resumes. No doubt about that. People get resumes all the time. Zuckerberg is 35, and Mayor Pete is 37. So they were at Harvard at one time, but friends with two of Zuckerberg's roommates. Trade secrets, but anyway, we won't go into all that. In recent weeks, Democrats escalated their criticism of Facebook for refusing to moderate political ads. So this is where it is out there, and it's very, very important that Democrats be mindful of this relation. And I am amazed that Amy Klobuchar hasn't made more of this, but she has talked about his resume, which brings into concern what is going on here. Now, from the Republican side, they claim Facebook has a bias. But Facebook's bias, if there is a bias, and they do have biases, some of our posts have been censored over there, particularly on the Mideast, atrocities in Gaza, murders of Palestinians, and the policy of the Zionists, an immediate message that pops up there that you're doing something wrong. So in other words, Facebook does have its political agenda, no doubt about that, and the political agenda is interwound with the political agenda of Wilsonian foreign policy, no doubt about that. So Zuckerberg himself would be perfect for that because of his the only candidate that has quote-unquote his military career, no matter how lightweight it is. And that is where it's a very, very, very strange situation here. Why Zuckerberg embrace Mayor Pete should worry you. Now, this is from the Wire magazine one. I thought we'd gotten to it. Some in Silicon Valley see technocrats wonder boy from South Bend as a safe alternative to big tech crackdowns promised by Liz Warren. Well, yeah, no doubt about that. They do see that, and that is where he is being cast. I'm surprised they hadn't cast him as a humble farm boy. But that they have not done. But what they have cast him at is citizen warrior, a very smart person that's out here. And in being a very smart person, it is interesting because he would be an intellectual, cast normally as from an elite family, but yet he goes to war when he didn't have to go to war. And he had opposed the war before he went down to enlist. So these are kinds of things that in itself, I was literally looking at the story of Ayn Rand, not that we ran, but this whole thing here, that Wire magazine, that both he and Zuckerberg share friends as well as education. They both completed their Harvard schooling in 2004. Zuckerberg, of course, departed as a sophomore, and Buttigieg, magna cum laude grad, headed for Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. Rhodes Scholar, incidentally, is a political appointment. Significantly, they share a persona, confidence, disruption, peddling wonder kid with a modern startup mentality. So this is saying that Mayor Pete Buttigieg is himself entrepreneurial. Now that in itself explains what he is and what his whole thing is. Entrepreneur, working at Deloitte and Touche. It had not been brought up here. And this is why, to be clear, I'm not invoking the startup founder who revered in visionary outside-the-box thinking. That would be, of course, Andrew Yang. Now, Andrew Yang is different there. He came up with a guaranteed $1,000 a month campaign. No, I mean a startup founder like Zuckerberg, who is confident in his honorable moves, quick to adopt a changing circumstance, determined to win at all costs. Now that is where it's very interesting there. And the campaign manager there, Mike Scone, we want to build a campaign that's a little disruptive, kind of entrepreneurial, and that's what he told the Associated Press. Right now it feels like a startup. The campaign's national investment chair there, and I won't try to pronounce his name, a former partner at a prominent venture capitalist firm, Perkins told Wire this summer that her Silicon Valley background was an asset. So in other words, they are running their campaign. I'm glad I finished reading this. I started reading this before. Not long ago, Silicon Valley startups would indeed have been seen as a worthy model for someone aspiring to be president. That was why Zuckerberg wanted to be that himself, should be a candidate. And in 2011, when the little judge and Zuckerberg took a car ride through South Bend, that was broadcast live on Facebook. The man thought to be testing the presidential waters was Zuckerberg, who turned 35, thus becoming constitutionally eligible to run. For 2020, however, the problem with using the startup as a model for a campaign is that the public knows better, and in no small part because of the scrutiny of Facebook, history of missteps, abuses, in place of supported Silicon Valley virtues like idealism, flexibility, merit, we now detect opportunism, self-dealing, individualism, overblown promises, and always a great man to lead us. Now, this is the old great man from Arthur Toynbee's situation here. And if you notice, this is all about men. This is Amy Klobuchar's comment there. And this is where it's going. We have a relatively short political career. These friends have helped him raise money. We learned from Bloomberg has appointed talented programmers and project managers toward positions in the campaign. This is similar to how the so-called PayPal mafia worked. A group of young executives, many with Stanford educations, used their dot-com wealth and a network of talented programmers to dominate startup culture in the early 2000s. Now, I don't know if the right winger from Facebook, what is his name, Threll, is involved there or not. He's usually in Republican manners, but this kind of explains to you what is actually going on here and what these people are doing on Buttigieg's behalf. Whereas Amy Klobuchar, on the other hand, a prosecutor, I hadn't said much about that, and from there to a U.S. Senator in the mold of Walter Mondale. She has won re-election 3 times in Minnesota. She has carried very red areas of the state of Minnesota that Trump won, there's no doubt about that. And she is usually way ahead, 20 or more points there, a little less the 2016, but still at the same time vastly ahead. So the point is made is in southern Minnesota, there's not any difference than in Iowa. And I've been across Iowa multiple times, starting with George McGovern, so way back there, across that state and across the breadth of also Minnesota, where we ran into 20 years ago, Amy Klobuchar. Anyway, the situation is there that they do match up, and the audience is there, and the campaign of Amy Klobuchar needs to be more focused on who Buttigieg is. Now, out of the debate later today, you'll start seeing these people take him on. They've taken him on before talking about an incident, a police shooting there in South Bend, and where he reacted as any mayor in South Bend would, not proactively, period. And in the coming months, not very many, because they were talking about early February, the Iowa caucuses, how the people of Iowa react to his message. And the message he's been giving is a traditional liberal message without the pizzazz of Joe Lunchbox Biden, who's been giving that message over 40 years. So that's where it is, and Biden has fallen some in the polls, but the polls indicate now, majority of the polls indicate that Biden will more than likely not do well in Iowa, New Hampshire, but then he'll start to pick up the ball as he leaves there. Now you go into Nevada, heavily union state there. Start this long slugging type match between these various people and who has the funds. Now this is very important when you look at the Mayor Petes of the world, and to an extent Bloomberg. Bloomberg won't come in till after Super Tuesday, or on Super Tuesday, after Super Tuesday. And we'll start putting multi-millions of dollars in. So you got to look at the overall atmosphere of this group. They brought in the former governor of the Commonwealth, Deval Patrick, the managing type at Brain Capital. Willie Romney was once there. So in other words, the capitalist class is not sparing any type of effort as far as monetary is concerned. They'll have him. Governor Patrick has his pack ready to start packing in the money. Joe Biden has a lot of Democratic types, office holders out there with him. The big debate now is how far can we go with Joe if Joe doesn't make it. Well, we have Bloomberg, we have Patrick, and of course they have the little mayor hid in the middle there. If he catches fire, he's already bought and paid for anyway, so there's no big deal there. So when we look to these polls, we'll start to see how this race starts to air out. I looked at some recent polls. I believe one poll is what it was right now, but anyway, Amy Klobuchar was up to 9, and we've historically talked about it used to be the 4 seats out of Iowa. So right now we know that Bernie Sanders is leaving Iowa on one of those seats, and so is Liz Warren. And whether or not Joe Biden will be on one of those seats, in other words, top 4 is not. And then we'll look at the other candidates. Will Amy Klobuchar leave on one of those seats? More than likely she will. And then where is Governor Pete? And this is where the big contest is. This is why we titled this episode "The Man from Facebook versus Amy Klobuchar." And we're playing with that title there now. And I think this is how we'll on the 20th of November 2019. We'll have more broadcasts. We have a broadcast coming up of the British election. There was a big debate between the Tory party candidate, Boris Johnson, and the Labour Party candidate, Mr. Coburn. And see where that is. And there's already a little bit dirty work going on there. The Tories turned their communications Twitter feed into a fact checker. So we're starting to see all of these things happening on what is called social media. The thing to pay attention to is what type of ads Buttigieg is putting on social media, where he's putting them, and how much money he is spending. DJ Trump is spending a lot of money on Facebook to start out there. They'll all be on Facebook. They'll be on Twitter. They'll be on YouTube. Their ads pop up there. Where will the other characters be? The conspiracy theorists, the NRA, all these characters will start coming into the race here in earnest as we go through the holidays. And incidentally, happy holidays to people out there, because Thanksgiving and Christmas will come up in North America and other places where it is. So you'll have that event going on. And in this backdrop, the Congress will be on recess next week, and then they'll come back, and they're trying to figure out if they can get impeachment done before 2020. So in other words, there's a very crammed calendar in here, and I can't recall now if there's another debate in December. I think there is. I don't have my cheat sheet here now, nonetheless. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. Good day.